Take it. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. Glad to have you on. Okay, so introduction. This is Kate Fry, and if we are many, they are few. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe. And today I'm interviewing William Morrison, a British communist, who will talk about the RMT union and the current strike. Well, thank you for agreeing to be on. It's always interesting. Your YouTube video when you talked about the RMT was really fascinating. A lot of interesting stuff. I saw, as I mentioned, I saw the Piers Morgan interview with Mick
Hmm.
Lynch. Oh, that was so trippy. That was just so weird. And I noticed Mick was trolling Piers Morgan. He changed his own Facebook avatar to Piers Morgan and Ghislaine Maxwell. That was a great troll. That was hysterical. Okay, well, anyway, first I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the current economic situation in the UK for American viewers. First, yeah, okay, it is recording. Good. Yeah, if you could talk a
Yeah.
little about the situation, economic situation. As I understand, the Russia sanctions have badly backfired. How's that going? How's that playing out?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot. There's a longer context. There's a shorter context. Don't know what you want. The longer context is that pretty much, essentially, we've been living under about 20 years of conservative government rule, where they've implemented policies of austerity, which means government slashing funding to public services like schools and hospitals, prisons, anything that is under public ownership has been just their funding has been slashed by these austerity measures.
Right.
And this is all apparently we're told by the government here that this is because the government is trying to save money because they blame Blair on the Iraq war and stuff that bankrupted this country. The Iraq War, the war on terror, which we helped the US take part in and had a leading role in some years of that conflict, and the conflict is still going on now. It's bankrupted the country. So when Tony Blair lost the election, and then the Conservatives won, pretty much for the past 20 years we've been living under Tory government rule, where they've implemented austerity measures, which have just absolutely devastated public services. And over that 20 years, many industries and businesses have been privatized. They've been sold out to foreign investment, and unions have been banned and stuff like this. Which makes this RMT strike very interesting, because we've had lots of very heavy restriction on our civil liberties to strike and to protest over the past couple of years. So it's really interesting that this is happening, and it's so big and so popular. But that's kind of the longer economic context. But the shorter one, it was of course the ongoing war in Ukraine. I don't know how to put it so we don't get restricted, but I mean, essentially what we're being told here is that the reason why the fuel prices are going up is because of Russia and their invasion. Because of Russia and their war and their invading, and all, we have to put up the prices because we have to be able to compete with the Russian gas as they devalue. But actually, when you actually look at it, that's not what's happening. The Russian economy took a dip for a couple of months, sure, and their oil prices have not gone up to where it used to be before the war, but they are coming up. They're strengthening. This whole sanctioning has completely backfired on the West. It hasn't worked the way they wanted it to. The Russian economy is doing extremely well given the circumstances. They have made friends that they never thought they'd ever make.
Right.
Before this war started, they've made new alliances. They've formed a closer alliance with China, for example. They've made trade deals with the DPRK, Iran, Syria, Venezuela, the new kind of vaguely left-wing anti-imperialist candidate that won the elections in Ecuador. They're forging alliances left, right, and centre, which they wouldn't have otherwise. So really, this embargo, this Western blockade, has completely backfired, and that's apparently the reason for the British, well, not just the British, but the international fuel crisis right now that we're dealing in. And the economic conditions. I mean, just today, mass protests erupted all over Britain. And motorways were closed, major cities were disrupted temporarily, as people just walked out of their cars and stopped driving. They blocked the main roads of Britain because they're sick and tired of paying extortionate prices for things where the government could very easily step in. mean, the government bails out corporations left, right, and centre. They bail out their criminal, their criminal cronies. They bail out members of the royal family for sexual misconduct and allegations of a lot worse than that. They're willing to bail out hundreds of millions of taxpayer money, but they're not allowed. They're not willing to step in to lower gas and petrol prices, even if it means helping out the working class. So yeah, there's been massive fuel protests and fuel strikes all over the country. People are having enough, and yeah, we're just the protests are demanding that the government step in and subsidise parts at the price when people go to the petrol station. But yeah, it's an absolute catastrophe, and I mean, ever since the Conservative government took charge here 20 years ago, the material conditions of Britain have been just rapidly declining, politically, socially, culturally, economically, every layer that you can think we've been lessening. I mean, the life expectancy in Britain has gone down. It's decreased over Tory rule. Like, we are living in this is the fifth or sixth most richest country on the planet, Britain. We lead the world in many, many industries, and yet we can't feed our people. We can't keep our elderly people warm in the winter. They freeze to death because they have to choose between heating and eating. It's absolutely disgusting. So there's very different people in this country, like all capitalist countries, that are living in completely two different worlds while being in the same border. There's 99.99% of people that work paycheck to live paycheck to paycheck. They have to make huge sacrifices. They can't afford to buy their children the right school uniform, for example. They can't afford to give them an adequate amount of food because they have to think about other things like rent and council tax and the increasing, obviously, fuel prices and the rent and stuff like that. It's getting quite unbearable, and the widespread mass discontent all over Britain, and that's only getting stronger. You know, every single year the Conservatives stay in power, people are getting angrier and angrier, and there's more and more people join us on the streets. I've been an activist for about 6 or 7 years. I was with the Young Communist League, the YCL, which is the youth wing of the Communist Party of Britain. I was with them for about 5 or 6 years. I was out on the street almost every week, and over that time, you know, every single year there was more and more people joining us on those streets, on those marches, and the YCL kicked me, and then I joined the CPG-BML, and even with them, I've been to a couple of public events with them in my 5 or 6 months being with them, and even then, there's been an increase in the membership we've received and in actual engagement with the public on events. You know, people are starting to get interested in our politics, which I guess is a good thing. But it's sad that it has to be this. We have to get popular by things getting so unbearable for people. Things were so unbearable for people that they are considering joining the Communist Party, even when half the people, I mean, most people in this country still think that we're evil monsters that are trying to take power and steal all their toothbrushes, you know? That's what most people think communists are in Britain still. And even then, they don't care. They'd rather join the Communist Party than have to put up with another 6 or 7 years of Conservative rule.
Right, interesting. So you say the public mood, is a lot of anger out there, anger in Britain right now?
Definitely. All over Europe. It isn't just in Britain. There's strikes in France. There's strikes in Germany. For the first time in Portuguese history, there's actually 6 members of the Portuguese Parliament that are members of the Communist Party. It's not just a British phenomenon. That Europe has, 20 to 25 year context, political context. So yeah, we've always been quite an angry people, to be honest. The British have a reputation that we're always moaning about something, and I guess that's true. But at least with this, we have a reason to be really, really angry and really, really frustrated at what's happening.
Right. Interesting. And as I understand, there's a strike wave brewing or starting in the UK right now. Teachers strike. Teachers, educators are talking about going on strike, and other unions are going on strike. Would it be accurate to say there is a strike wave underway right now?
I think so. I'm hoping so. Yeah, I hope the RMT strikes are the start of a phenomenon. Definitely. The Fire Brigades Union, the FBU, they have been had wage freezes for the past 6 or 7 years. They have publicly came out and said that they support the RMT strikes, and they have threatened labour action in the past 2 years. So they very well might join the RMT on the streets and go on strike. The teachers union, the EIS. They have been striking for the past couple of years and still haven't been met. So they might very well. This is the ample time for them to come out on the streets and join the RMT too. And again, the EIS union, the teachers union, they have openly shown support for the RMT. So yeah, I think you're right. I think this is a trade union wave, and it's going to be a domino effect. And the RMT strike, I'm hoping, is just the start of a very, very long and a very, very effective popular movement here in Britain.
Right, hope so too. Yeah, as I understand, for Americans, the labor unions are structured a little differently. In the UK, you have trade unions, like a single union for a trade, for an industry, a cross industry. We're a little different. Like I worked for a call center once, and we were represented by the United Auto Workers. In Britain, it's a little different, as I understand. What do you say is the major difference?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think so I'm not an expert on the structural kind of thing of American unions, but if that's the case, what your example that you give me, then it is slightly different. We have a trade union, so a trade is pretty much just a skill. You have to go to college, you have to go to university. Well, not necessarily, but that's how you get that. Well, or if you've worked in an industry for a long time, you get the skill, you get the trade, some sort of certificate. So that's what a trade union is. So, like firefighters, they have to go through special training to become a firefighter. So when they get the job, they join the fire brigades union. So it's a trade union, definitely. So it isn't so much like there's this big monopolistic trade unions that are just taking over lots of different industries. And there's a trade union for each industry. So fire brigades, obviously teachers, you have to go through special university training to become a teacher. So they have their own trade union because it's a trade, it's a skill. So yeah, pretty much everything. And the RMT stands for Rail, Maritime and Transport. So it's a transport sector. Those people have been trained or have worked in that industry for a long time. They know how to run the tracks and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, trade unions here in Britain, it's there's one union for each kind of trade industry, a skill. And yeah, we don't really overlap. The RMT doesn't get involved in the ongoing discussions and negotiations with the EIS teachers union, for example. Because they're not experts, they don't really know about each other's trade, so they just stick with what they know. It's just one trade, one industry. It's simple.
Okay, interesting. Now, I get the impression also the unions in Britain are much more militant than those in the U.S. We have this really horrible business union philosophy where unions cooperate with management, and there are like no strike clauses in contracts, and really a bad situation. I was listening to Mick Lynch. He seems head and shoulders above any major U.S. labor leader. He seems like a pretty militant guy. What's your take? You said he doesn't claim to be a Marxist, but he seems like implicitly like he understands.
Yeah, Mick Lynch is a very good example of a very militant and very revolutionary kind of labor trade union leader. I wouldn't say that's the case for the majority of unions. I think British unions are very similar to the Americans in that, yes, we used to be very militant and very revolutionary. During the 1970s and 1980s in Britain, the Communist Party of Britain had about 80 to 100,000 members. We had party affiliates in every single union in the country. We influenced trade union policy. The Communist Party was huge, and we had massive influence in not only our own party, but other organizations within the left-wing movement. Obviously, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the influence of the Communist Party has gone down quite significantly. We no longer have the influence we used to. So because of that, lots of trade unions here in Britain have fallen to kind of the Social Democrats, the Kautskyists, the kind of reformists. They think, oh well, if we get a fairer slice of the pie or whatever, and a fairer portion of the wages, then we'll be happy. We won't bother you.
Yes.
There's not so much of like, well, we have to completely change the system. We have to transform society to a new mode of production. We have to workers' ownerships are the means of production. There's not many trade unions nowadays really calling for that kind of drastic action. They're more reformist, like, well, if you just give us a little pay rise, we'll not bother you for a couple of years, and then in a couple of years we'll do another strike, and then you'll give us another pay rise, blah blah blah. So yeah, I wouldn't say that we're necessarily revolutionary, but Mick Lynch definitely is. And yeah, based on what he says in interviews, very kind of Marxist language, very socialistic terminology, he very much thinks that we're living in a class war, and that this strike is the start of a new domino effect, class action, proletariat, working class versus ruling class. He is very that, but I think he's a rarity. In my experience and studying the leaders, I think, yeah, he's he's a gem. He's an absolute asset to the union here because he's so militant. Because he is quite rare in British trade unions.
Okay, interesting. Now, how large is the RMT, and what industries do they cover?
The RMT, it's the biggest trade union in Britain. It's got 80,000 members. Well, that's not including the NHS. So the NHS obviously kind of acts as its own union. Obviously, that's the National Health Service, public health system. Pretty much, that's more confused. They're not officially kind of classed as a union just because of how big they are. I'm not really sure about the actual official kind of things, but officially, the RMT is the biggest union if we don't consider the NHS. And yeah, they have 80,000 members. And yeah, they cover the rail, maritime, and transport. So rail is obviously the trains and the tubes in London, for example. You know, the underground, the tubes. Maritime are like boats, so the lifeguards, cruises, boats, anything that's under public ownership. What's the maritime, and then the transport can just be buses. Public buses, maybe that takes you to city to city. Those are the three industries that the RMT cover, and yeah, they're the biggest union in Britain.
Okay, and what were the issues that they were concerned about? What specifically were they upset about? Are they upset about?
Yeah, there's two major ones. The biggest major one is the fact that they haven't had a pay rise in about 5 to 6 years, and since then, inflation rate by CPI has gone up 11.1%. And it's due to go up 12% by the end of this year. So that means that even though they're getting paid the same, you know, financially, you know, if you just look at the numbers, they're getting paid the same. But taking into account the rise of inflation over the past 5 years, they're actually getting paid less. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just because of the fuel prices, the rent prices, all of the prices for pretty much everything has rapidly gone up in the past 5 years. So they're not getting paid as much anymore. It's not worth as much. So, I mean, yeah, but they're asking for, so despite the fact that CPI inflation is about 11 to 14%, they're actually only asking for a 6 to 7% wage rise. So that's not much. So even if they get that, which is considered a lot, you know, you can see it all the time on the British media, Piers Morgan saying, "Oh my God, you're holding the government to ransom. You can't ask for a 9% wage rise. That's absolutely insane." And actually, even if they get that, it's still a pay cut compared to what it was 5 years ago. Compared to, if you take into account inflation rates, a 7 to 8% pay rise is still less than the 11% inflation that they're currently going under. So it's still going to be a pay cut compared to what they were getting paid, the value of their money 5 years ago. It's basic maths. So I don't really know why the media are educated people. They know about this stuff. So they're just purposefully lying to us, hoping that the working class are just stupid, dumb, uneducated people that don't really know what they're talking about. But I mean, I'm 19 and I can see through their lies. You know, I'm not necessarily the most intellectual person here, and you know, you can see it clear as day. There has been no wage rise, but yet the price of everything pretty much has gone up, and that can't be accepted. So that's the one demand: a 6 to 7% pay rise. Okay. The second demand is job security. They want to feel safe at work. During the COVID pandemic, lots and lots of thousands and thousands of railway staff were just laid off. They were paid off. They were sacked from work pretty much overnight. You know, they went into work and their boss was there saying, "Oh, why are you in today? You don't have a job anymore," and they had to leave. You know, they just completely paid off. No support, no nothing.
Was this because of the mandates, because of the vaccine mandates, or some other reason?
Yeah, just during lockdown. Though, the buses and trains were kind of working at a skeleton version, so there wasn't a need for the workers that they had. Their capacity was kind of restricted. So yeah, so they kind of have all this surplus workers out there getting paid for not actually working. So the big rail chiefs just lay them all off, and tens of thousands of people in the industry lost their jobs. So the ones that are left, obviously, their second demand is ensuring that they actually have some job security. They're actually protected at work. Not only that, but they're giving the right equipment. If this was to ever happen again, they want confirmation and reassurance that they would be given the right PPI, like personal protective equipment, like face masks and stuff like that, if anything like this happened ever again. Because it wasn't just nurses and healthcare workers that lost their life during the pandemic. public railways and bus drivers and stuff lost their lives too. They were also on the front line of the pandemic, and they were completely unprotected, completely disregarded, and about 85 to 100,000 healthcare workers lost their lives during the pandemic here in Britain. But it was about 5 to 10,000 workers that worked in that industry too that lost their lives. And so they want a 6 to 7% pay rise, and they want to be protected and feel safe at work. That's their two big issues.
Okay, right. Interesting. Wow. Now, as I understand, they had a 3-day strike, or what is the situation? Are they still on strike, or I should know this, but
yeah, they are still on strike because the government hasn't pandered to them yet.
Okay.
They had, I can't remember the dates off the top of my head, but it was the start of July, so they might still have planned. But they had 3 days of action. I think it was the 1st, 6th, and 7th of July. Could be totally wrong, but they had 3 major days, and then if the government, so they thought they'd win because it's 50,000 workers going out on strike. It's the biggest strike. It's the biggest real strike since 1989. It's the biggest strike in 30 years. Right. The last time there was a strike this big was under Margaret Thatcher, when she threatened to privatise she did privatise the railway station. It's only recently been renationalised under public ownership. But yeah, so that was the last time. So there hasn't been something quite like this. So we were hoping by now the government would pander just by having 3 days, 50,000 people not working on the rails across Britain for 3 days, but hasn't yet. They still haven't agreed to the conditions of the RMT. So yeah, Mick Lynch have made it very, very clear that if nothing works in the 3 days that they're going to go on strike, they will just keep going, and they're willing to go through the whole summer. And it'll be very disruptive, and a lot of people will be very, very annoyed, but they don't really care. They want to be safe at work, they want to be protected by their bosses, and they want they want fair wages. So they're willing to go way past their 3 days.
Right, interesting. Okay, now what's the public mood? What's the public attitude towards the RMT? Is it generally supportive? Or I know there's a lot of criticism in the media, but is the public, would you say, supportive of them, or mixed? Or
mixed, very mixed. It always is. It always, the British public is I don't know if it's a British thing, but we like to make a big deal out of not very much. There's lots of drama queens in the British media and the British population. So I'm not really sure. It's very, very mixed. I'd say that the 2 biggest political camps in British society are younger people who are more progressive, socially speaking, and kind of more woke and kind of more left-wing, vaguely left-wing. So they do support the strikes. And then obviously the second largest camp in my experience are kind of the middle-aged to elderly white population who are more conservative and more regressive. So that's the same here. So depending on who you talk to or what demographic you're speaking to, I know a lot of university students and stuff that are really loving it. They absolutely support it. And all over TikTok, I'm on TikTok, and pretty much 90% of my For You page is just all these people. I don't know what the right terminology is. I'm kind of new to TikTok, but they're kind of sharing and re-thinging clips of Mick Lynch and with what he's saying at interviews and stuff. They're loving it. They're very, very much, very, very supportive. So younger people and more kind of progressive, kind of left-wing people are very, very supportive of it. But beyond that, if you speak to people who aren't very political, the 2 camps I mentioned were people who are quite political. Most people in Britain aren't really. They just kind of watch the news. So I guess one kind of cynical view I kind of have is if all those non-political people are just watching the news or just hear this strike vaguely in the background on the media, they'll probably pick up some quite negative views towards the strikes, which is unwanted and should be prevented. But no, that's not my experience. My experience is it's very mixed. If you just go out to the streets and speak to people, it's very, very mixed. But no, I think the strikes do have the majority support by the working class. Based on social media, they definitely do.
Okay, interesting. Now, this also includes Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, or is it just in England?
All over. So I'm in Scotland, live in Dundee. There are
Okay.
currently no trains to Glasgow or Edinburgh. So
Okay.
Glasgow and Edinburgh are the biggest cities in Scotland. Edinburgh has a population of about 1 million. Well, the population of Scotland is only about 5 million. So
Right.
1/5 of people in Scotland live in Edinburgh. So it's a very, very industrial place, and obviously Glasgow too. It's just the second biggest city in Scotland. Yeah, I from where I am right now in Dundee, I can't get there by a train. I'd have to take the bus. So yeah, it's not just in England. It's a British-wide thing, and because Scotland and Wales are part of Britain, then it affects us too. We're all connected by the same railway networks. We're all connected by the same transport systems. So yeah, it definitely affects us too. So yeah, there's people in Scotland that would be able to maybe see friends and family in Glasgow or Edinburgh just as much as people in Durham or Newcastle can't go down to London to see their family there if they wanted to. So yeah, so
Right.
it's a British-wide thing.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I've been to Scotland years ago. Friendliest people in the world, super friendly. The Highlands are desolate, like go a long ways without seeing anyone, but friendliest
Yeah.
people in the world. Yeah, just pivoting slightly. As a British communist, what's your take on Jeremy Corbyn?
I'm assuming I'd have the same take on him as most American communists would have on Bernie Sanders.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
might be a step in the right direction. He's a lot more progressive than most people we've had in a long, long time.
right.
He had some good policies, like he wanted to nationalize Wi-Fi. He wanted government subsidies for like Wi-Fi. He wanted free Wi-Fi pretty much everywhere, which is quite a progressive, popular policy. And obviously, he has had some. He was a lot more progressive and a lot more friendly to communists when he was younger, when he was out in the streets protesting and getting himself arrested at strikes and stuff. He was very, very supportive of the Irish Republican Army and the struggles in Ireland. He was very much in support of the Irish nationalists fighting against British rule. He's kind of mellowed in that view over time. He's more nuanced now. But back in the, if you listen to him when he was younger, when he was more progressive, oh yeah, you'd think he was a communist. You know, he supported well, he didn't openly support it, but he said friendly things to Hamas. He supported Nasser Arafat and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. He was very critical of Israel, which is actually why he's been labelled an anti-Semite. Lots of people in the British media seem to think that Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite, and I don't think he is. I mean, I don't support him fully, but he's not an anti-Semite, and I think he agrees with most British communists in our criticism of Israel. It's a Zionist, genocidal state, and they're mass murdering innocent people pretty much on a daily basis. And not many progressives would support a government like that. And I'm not sure why our government supports them. You know, the British government have always been very supportive of Israel, as have the Americans. So, yeah, it's a sad thing to see. But yeah, nowadays, speaking about Jeremy Corbyn as he is now, he's a lot more left wing than we've had in a long, long time. But he's very, very different. He's on a different level to the communists. He's very mellow. He's pretty much a moderate. He's a social democrat. He's a social democrat. He wants Britain to be like Norway and Sweden and Iceland and Denmark. He wants a social democratic society. And from a communist perspective, that's not good enough. We want more than that. We want more than just reformist rainbow capitalism.
Right. Sure.
We want proper working class ownership of the means of production. So that's where we differentiate our vision for our future Britain.
Sure. Right. Yeah, he struck me as a well-meaning person, but very weak figure, politically very weak. But yeah, it's too bad. What do you think Boris Johnson will last, or do you think his political career will be over soon? What do you see for that?
Oh well, I mean, he seems to be completely uncancelable. Nobody can get rid of him.
Yeah.
His own his own members have tried to get rid of him. You know, he's had about 2 votes of no confidences, which he's won just by a slim margin. You know, he's like a bad smell that you just can't get away. You know, it doesn't matter what he does or what he says. He always finds a way to just kind of win at the last minute to stay in power. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
so I can't say. You know, one piece of evidence that would support him and his leadership coming to an end very soon is the council elections in Britain. We had council elections a couple of months ago where Labour won an absolute landslide. They deposed and deseated lots of Conservative councillors, And the Conservatives take a right bashing at those council elections. But council elections don't really mean much. They don't really have much power. It isn't like a national election or a general election where you're voting for a member of parliament. Council elections are more, well, it's on a local scale. So like even in Dundee, the city I live in Dundee, we have like 8 or 9 councillors that we'd vote for just in this city. So it's a very small scale, very just kind of municipal kind of thing. So that might not mean much in the general British scale at an actual general election. We'll have to see. But I don't know. I think even if Boris Johnson doesn't win his seat, I think the Conservatives might actually win the next election. Labour is very weak. People, working class people in this country, like Boris Johnson an awful lot better than they'd ever like Keir Starmer.
Right.
Keir Starmer is the most mocked, most laughed at, most hated political leader we have in this country.
Okay.
I think people would rather know that they have a psychopath in power than have to take a bet on potentially voting for an even worse psychopath who's just a little bit more clever about it. At least Boris Johnson knows he's an evil man who represents evil, disgusting things. Keir Starmer does it without even knowing. He doesn't know what he's saying is actually just of no help to the working class at all. So I think the working class here respect Boris Johnson's honesty. Like at least we know where he lies and where his priorities are. He doesn't lie about it. He said it He said it over and over again. He's a staunch defender of the banks. He loves conservatism. He's a Christian himself. We know where his priorities are. Whereas with Keir Starmer, it's a lot more we don't know yet. So I think at the next general election, people are a lot more willing to just stick with the chaos of Boris Johnson. So I really hope not. I really hope I'm proved wrong, but I don't know. Boris Johnson is a slippery guy. So
very interesting. Is it accurate to say that Keir Starmer is a Blairite? Would that be an accurate description?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, the second Keir Starmer won the leadership race for the Labour Party leadership, Tony Blair was the first person to come out to support him and endorse him and stuff and congratulate him on victory and stuff. He never did that with Jeremy Corbyn. I think, I mean, all Keir Starmer has done since he became leader of the Labour Party is slander and criticise Jeremy Corbyn for being a communist and for accusing him of being this radical extremist leftist. He's a lot more in the same ideological camp as Tony Blair with the kind of neoliberal social democratic views.
Right, interesting. Now, finally, what would you say is the way ahead for the left in Britain for a working class struggle? Do you see like a major movement coming out of the strike wave, or what do you see as the way ahead, the way forward?
I have an optimistic view. I'm kind of a revolutionary optimist. I've always tried to be as much as possible, and I mean, even when I was in the YCL, they're very popular. They're all over social media, and the YCL are very, very effective in picking up membership in the university campuses. They hire, not hire. They recruit lots of people who are in the younger generations, and the same with the CPGBML, the party I'm with now. Their membership has been increasing over the next couple of years. So I'd like to see that continue to increase. I'd not like to see that membership rates plateau, and I'm feeling optimistic about that. You know, we've had 20 years of Conservative government. I've made it quite clear on this stream. I think they might even win another general election, which means 5 more years of Conservative rule. Right. So, as long as things continue to get worse for people, the more popular communism gets, which is a bad paradox that shouldn't be a thing, but it is a thing. The worse material conditions are out there, the more popular communist movements get. And like I said at the start of this interview, I really hope that this strike, the RMT strikes, is the start of a wave, a mass movement of working class people. Like I said, there's been widespread mass discontent amongst the working class for about 20 years now, and this might just be the time where things burst out and they go out of control, and people really start to take power. And I think when that happens, both major communist parties, the CPP and the CPGBML, will fully support that, and will be with the movement the whole step, every step of the way, and will be completely supportive of the working class and their fight for a better future. And yeah, my personal vision is a British socialist republic, a future where the British state is owned by workers and we have worker ownership of the means of production. I wouldn't see an independent Scotland. I wouldn't see an independent Wales. I would just like to have a socialist Britain. And I know that's a controversial view. Even in Britain, that's a controversial view. It's a long story. Maybe we'll have another interview about that.
Sure.
We might not have time today, but
Sure.
yeah, that's my personal view. The CPGBML hold the position that we're better together, and we have to build socialism together. We have to show complete solidarity and comradeship with all peoples of the UK, whether it's Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. Wales, Scotland, and England. We'd support Irish reunification. If the workers were to take over Britain tomorrow and create a socialist state, a socialist Britain would not include Northern Ireland at all. We'd give them a referendum, and we'd accept the self-determination of the people of Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland are not British people. From a Marxist perspective, if referring to Marxism and the national question, Irish people are not British, but whereas Welsh and Scottish people, according to Stalin's analysis in that book, we are British people ethnically and historically. We're Britain. We've always been Britain, and people might not like that, but it's a historical fact, and Stalin would agree on his pamphlet. So, yeah, my vision is a future socialist Britain, and we're working on it.
Okay, right. So probably save this for another time, but you would not support Scottish independence. It's probably a very long story, but
I'd accept the vote. We are having one, so Scotland is having a second independence referendum next October,
Right.
October 2023. And yeah, I mean, I would campaign no. I would campaign vigorously on the no side, on the no campaign, and I would go canvassing around people's houses and encouraging a no vote. But I would, as a communist, I would accept a yes vote. And if the majority of working class people in Britain, in Scotland, support independence and voted for it, then obviously I'd accept that, and that'd be fine.
Okay, cool. Now, I can't think of anything else to add. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, that you'd like to add?
No, I think I'm okay. I just want to say thank you for inviting me to have this interview with you. It's really good to get the word out. It's good to be interviewed by an American, because I think a lot of your viewers and stuff are American, and they have quite an American-centric view on the world and stuff. So it's good to get maybe a British or a different voice out there who speaks about things that maybe aren't affected, that doesn't affect kind of Americans. And yeah, it's good to get the voice out there. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Sure. And you have a YouTube channel. I'll provide a link. Is there any other? Do you have like a blog or anything? Or
yeah, no, I'm on YouTube. My channel name is just my name here, William Morrison, and I'm on Twitter and I'm on Facebook. So feel free to give me a follow or an ad. That'll be much appreciated.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, William. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Okay. Cheers. Cheers.